Special guest today is Trevor Kennedy. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Crystal, and thank you very much for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. So, what drew you to the horror genre? And tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Well, yeah, my name's Trevor Kennedy. I'm a writer and editor from Belfast. I edit Phantasmagoria magazine and its spin-off special edition series. And I'm also a writer of short stories and stuff as well. I do a bit of radio and podcast on top of that. What first drew me to the horror genre? Well, basically, it's just always been in me from I was no age, from I was 3 years old, watching Doctor Who and, Scooby Doo and stuff like that. Obviously, then as I got older, I progressed into more serious stuff, and sort of in primary school, I was watching films like, Dawn of the Dead and all those sorts of things. Actually, one of the very first horror films that I remember clearly is Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original. Remember that creeping me out when I was very, very young. The original from the 1950s, excuse me, and there was things like Day of the Triffids. There was a BBC series of that back when I was growing up, The Omen. And then I would have gotten into things like the Freddy Krueger films, Hellraiser, of course, The Evil Dead, the Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th films. Yeah, I was a pretty morbid kid, still am at 47.
So how do you get your ideas for a story? Where do you usually start from and how do you progress it?
Well, I've always been, quite a big sort of reader as well from no age. So, obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, in my head. There always has been, with things like, all the classics and stuff, and Lovecraft and all that sort of things. But a lot of my stories, just come from the most random of places at times, sometimes would be based in sort of on real life events, but obviously they would be, dramatized, for basically more effective reasons, that sort of thing. But what I do, I think it was 2007. I was at a talk in Belfast, where I'm from. Belfast, it was Queen's University in Belfast, and it was a talk by the American filmmaker David Lynch, of Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive fame, and he said it's something that's always stuck by me, because as a kid, I wrote a bit. I used to write horror stories and stuff, but then in my 20s and stuff, I didn't really bother as much. I've still watched and read a lot of stuff, but anyway, in my 30s was sort of dipping my toe back into the writing sort of scene, and it was around this time that I went to this talk by David Lynch. The talk was actually meant to be about transcendental meditation, which he did talk about, but everyone there just wanted to talk about Twin Peaks and his films, myself included. But anyway, he said something that day, which has always stuck by me. He said, anytime you have an idea, it could be at the most random of times. You could be on the bus, you could be going to work or whatever. You could be going to the toilet, and you would have certainly so suddenly some random idea. He says, always write it down. So I have sort of pages and pages of notes of story ideas and stuff. But a lot of the times I'll just sort of on a whim, I will sort of just have an idea for a story and I'll just start working on it straight away. Yeah. So yeah, these things tend to come randomly. Sometimes even as pretentious as this sounds, they can be based on dreams I've had or whatever, So yeah, I get sort of ideas for stories from all around.
A lot of authors do say they get their ideas from dreams, so that's not unusual for you to say that. So
yeah. Yeah, I have some quite vivid and sort of crazy dreams, so they're pretty good if you're a horror writer,
No, you're not alone there. A lot of authors have said the same thing, that they have their ideas come from dreams.
Yes, yeah.
So in your stories, do you sort of like explore a particular theme or a message, even if you don't know that you're doing it?
Maybe not so much themes, although maybe there has some of my stories would have similarities. I do quite write a bit about things like sort of the whole God question and stuff, and the sometimes the afterlife. I've written about things like addiction, and I've sort of connected it all to horror. So I do like to sort of mix the fictional horror with the sort of real world horror, if that makes sense, and sort of like try and put a gritty, authentic edge to things. Because even outside of the horror genre, if I do watch non-horror films, I would prefer more gritty, sort of realistic dramas. Maybe set up in the north of England or something like that, like Shane Meadows films. Those types of things. So I do like to have a gritty, authentic edge to my stories, but at the same time, I do write some sort of horror comedy stuff as well. So I'm like, I don't know, there's a bit of a conflict there where I like both the edgy, gritty, sort of more serious adult horror, but I like to have a laugh as well sometimes. So
Yeah,
there's two things going on maybe at the same time.
brilliant. So, what's your approach to pacing a story? Are you a pantser or a plotter?
No, it depends. So a bit of both, really. At times, but sometimes on a whim, I will just get an idea and I will just knock a story out maybe in 2 or 3 hours, then leave it for a couple of days, go back and edit it. But ideally, would prefer to plot, and sort of map things out. But sometimes these things take on a life of their own, and you just end up just going with the flow. So I used to. I mean, I generally in life I like to be organized and things like that. But sometimes these things just happen sort of out of the blue, and you just feel that you're compelled to sort of write this story or do
Yeah.
it straight away.
Do you base any of them off your own experiences or fears?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think especially a lot of my earlier stuff would have been based on a lot of real life experiences, where I would have a lot of it's based on addiction. My own personal experiences of addiction. And alcoholism and sort of other, let's just say, mood altering substances.
Yeah.
So I would have, I suppose, in a way, because I was just coming into recovery then, and sort of getting into proper recovery, it was a form of therapy. Writing had become a form of therapy to me, well, a
Yeah.
form of self therapy. But I think now, where I've sort of past that stage, I'm more sort of wanting to write good horror fiction as opposed to writing this self therapy type stuff, although set to a horror backdrop, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Again, a lot of authors have said the same, that they
Yeah.
use their writing as a way of sort of like getting through things that are going on in their life.
Oh, definitely. It's writing. It can be very, very therapeutic. It is very therapeutic.
Yeah, it's a good it's a good outlet, isn't it? It's a safe outlet.
Definitely, definitely. And you can just bleed all of your emotions onto a page,
Yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, with writing, you're basically you're playing God. You can do whatever you want. You can create characters. You can put them through hell. But it's fiction, so you get away with it. That sort of thing. So yeah, there's something that definitely very therapeutic and cathartic about it. But I even find that with even reading fiction as well, that's not my own, and even watching, like horror films and stuff. For me, it's escapism. The world, the real world is a dark, horrific place. And if you want to see real horror, just go outside your front door or switch on your TV. But for me, the fictional horror is mostly, for the most part, escapism.
yeah, I agree. Okay, so I know you mentioned about your characters. Do
Yes.
you sort of like base them on people that you know, experiences that you've had?
Yeah, at times I will, draw sort of parts of characters, from people that I've known in the real life. Sometimes even parts of myself. I put into sort of characters and stories. But I'm actually trying to get away from that and just write sort of original characters, from the ground up. And
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sort of more sort of trying to get down that angle. But I suppose it's like, any sort of form of, writing fiction, there is always going to be a little part of you in there, no matter what. I don't think that can really be helped.
Yeah. So what's been the hardest thing about writing in the horror genre?
Um, I don't- Discipline and getting the time. But I think what I've learned is there'll never be the perfect time, where you're feeling fully inspired, to sit down and write or whatever. So it's really about time management, not procrastinating, but also just getting it done, even if you're not in the mood to write, and you don't feel like it. Sometimes the best writing you do is whenever you've had to force yourself to do it,
Yeah.
where you've just sort of actually sat down and just made yourself do it, and by the end of it, you've maybe written for a few hours or whatever. By the end of it, there's that real great sense of satisfaction, work satisfaction. That's really it's really good.
Has there ever been a scene that you found really difficult to write?
Well, I was just interviewed actually today. It was a written interview, and the guy asked me about a certain story I wrote, called "The Evil Men Do." I don't think it was so much difficult to write, but it is a brutal story and quite violent as well. It actually appears in my new collection, a bit of a plug here, which is out from Dark Out Publishing, Bad Dreams and Reflections. But it's basically it's about it concerns a brutal murder, but it's more the aftermath of the murder. But there is some quite and the disposing of a body, but it is quite well. It's very violent and I suppose quite heavy. But at the same time, I would argue that it's not gratuitous. It wasn't really difficult to write, but I can maybe understand some people might have difficulty when reading it because it is quite. It's probably my most violent story, and I'm not even into sort of violence or anything, that type of thing. But it was more the points that I was trying to make from it. It was more the overarching points were about the insanity of the sort of deranged alcoholic mind. Obviously things are exaggerated for, when they're heightened for dramatic purposes, but at the same time, yeah, it's quite. People have said to me that they found it quite a disturbing read, and it's powerful stuff. There was another story I wrote called "It Begets." It's in the same collection, Bad Dreams and Reflections, and I'm from Belfast, Northern Ireland, and I always swore that I would never write about the Northern Ireland Troubles, but this story just came to me, and I wrote it, and it concerns the Northern Ireland Troubles, and it's nondescript in that it's not taken from one side or the other, and it's quite a, I suppose. Somebody reading it would find it quite, I think, very possibly quite disturbing and upsetting. But again, these with serious topics, like the first one that I was talking about the derangement of the alcoholic mind and the insanity of that, and also things like the Northern Ireland Troubles with very serious topics. To me, that you can't hold back. They have to be authentic and honest.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously it'll make the reader relate to you as well.
Yeah, and even though they are fiction, you're still approaching real life things, real life topics.
That's right. So how do you think the horror genre is going to go?
I think it appears we're in a bit of a horror boom. Never before, certainly that I remember, has there been so much, horror literature and, horror films and horror series, although studios, and I would say a lot of publishers as well, would shy away from horror. They will always take it on because they're sort of ashamed. It's like their dirty secret, but at the same time they're making a lot of money from it. One thing I have noticed about the genre lately, the overall genre, I suppose, of horror, fantasy, and science fiction, there appears to be a bit of a sort of overindulgence in superhero films and sort of fiction, and also young adult themed stuff, which is obviously hugely popular and there's a market for it. But I think maybe, I'm speaking from a personal point of view, I would like to see more of a return to adult horror. Now, I just watched last night at the cinema Eli Roth's new film, and I'm not even an Eli Roth fan. Thanksgiving, it's called.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it, and it was just, I think it was more, I was relieved. I mean, it's a slasher film, nothing too original, but it's decent for what it is. And I think I was just more relieved that it was an 18 certificate and it was actually an adult horror film, for a change.
Yeah, there's been a few mixed reviews on that one, hasn't there?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's nothing, there's nothing original, there's nothing very, outstanding. But I thought it was decent enough for what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah, a few reviews I've heard is that it's just a slasher film, which is a good thing because they said it was a slasher film.
Yes.
It was blunt and to the point, and then you've got other people that are saying they wanted more to it.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I don't know. I've seen a lot of Eli Roth's earlier films, so it does appear that he's maybe matured a little as a director and writer, so that it's less just sort of. I mean, sometimes I feel that his stuff comes across like he's like sort of like a 16-year-old boy trying to impress his mates, his earlier stuff. But this feels a bit more refined, and
Yeah.
it was it's nothing spectacular, but it was decent enough. I
Yeah.
found.
I have to get watching that one. I haven't
Yeah.
watched it yet. Okay.
There's actually some very good points made in it as well. More like it's almost like satirical, and about sort of Black Friday and the craziness with the Black Friday sales
Yeah.
and stuff, and society, its sort of obsession, getting these bargains and stuff. So I quite like that. There's sort of some very good points made there.
Yeah, there's going to be a few people out there on Black Friday, isn't there, going into the hospital?
Yeah, well, this is it, and with this, it's about this supermarket having a sale, and they're literally killing each other, to get sort of cheap waffle irons, whatever a waffle iron is. you know.
Never mind. Okay,
Yep.
so have you had any sort of like memorable feedback from your readers?
Yes, I mean, yeah, I mean, just any sort of like sort of positive reviews, obviously, very flattering, and just it's all very good and stuff. But I'm very much of the approach that you have to be here to learn, and you'll always be learning, until the day you leave this mortal realm, because I look back at some of my earlier stuff, and it is, there's flaws, certainly. But, so I would say to anyone, you'll probably learn more from the bad reviews and the negative reviews as you will from the good ones. But just sort of, I would just say, take them all on board. And and just run with them all, and because there's always room for improvement. You could be Stephen King or some of the greatest out there like Ramsey Campbell and all, but for me anyway, it's every day's a school day, and it's always a learning process.
Yeah, that's right. Talk about your books then.
Right, yes, I edit Phantasmagoria magazine, which is very much an homage to, sort of the old sort of horror magazines that I grew up with, like Fantasy Tales, Fear magazine, and, stuff like that. So it's really grown over the last few years that I've been doing it, and, just been getting amazing support from some of the biggest names in the field, the writers and artists and stuff, and it's just been really flattering and a real fanboy moment. So that's been a big thing. Takes up, obviously a lot of my time. It's been great. Fiction wise, yeah, as I was saying, a brand new collection out from Dark Owl Publishing, which is available from Amazon and other select stores. Bad Dreams and Reflections. It's a collection of what I consider some of my strongest past stories, and also some new ones as well. So yeah, that's on sale throughout the world from Amazon and other select stores. And yeah, but I've a few other things in the pipeline, and a few other projects, and yeah, I like to keep busy, and it all helps keep me sort of sane and ticking over, as well as my other work. I also have a day job as well, so yeah, for me it's great to keep busy.
Fantastic. So, what advice would you give to someone who was wanting to write in the horror genre?
Just do it. And I think the biggest hurdle, certainly with me anyway, was confidence. And so any feelings of I'm not being confident, or I could never make it as a writer type thing. Well, you'll never find out until you actually sort of put pen to paper, and you will make mistakes, and it will be a struggle at times. And like any sort of aspect of life, you'll have good days and bad days. But what? Just take the rough with the smooth, and try and learn from it all. And take advice on board. Be mentored if possible by people, and always be open to advice, and just always open to learning, because we this is like you will always be learning anyway. There's no sort of right or wrong way to be a writer, so you're going to be learning different things every day and stuff, and that's life in general, I suppose.
Yeah. So do you ever feel any remorse for what you put the readers through?
No, not at all. It's fiction. Not at all. Yeah, I mean, in fact, if I, did, if people did come back to me and say that though they were terrified or that scared them or that shocked them or whatever, I take that as a compliment. That's what that's what I'm trying to do. But at the same time, I like to get serious points across in the fiction as well. I hope anyway that there's more than just sort of horror to it, and sort of scares and all that sort of thing. But no remorse at all. No, certainly not. The way I see it, it's fiction, and obviously you don't want young children reading some of the stuff that you've read and stuff, but with adult readers, if you're reading a story and you don't like it, or you're reading a book you don't like it, or it's making you not feel right, or you're watching a film that does the same, then just stop it. Just stop reading it or stop watching it or whatever. But it's horror. The sort of name horror, it sort of gives it away.
Fantastic. So is there anything else you want to add, Trevor?
No, it's just very honoured to be asked to come on the podcast here, and very much appreciate it. So do, and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
It's a pleasure.